Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Throne of Seal based on novel. So let's start. The multicolored spiral landed on the gorilla's head and immediately turned into countless multicolored lights making their way into its body. The little gorilla stood unmoving with a blank face, its body filled up with multicolored glosses. What Long Houchen had declared he was having a try about was mainly about comprehension. After his cultivation had made such a qualitative leap, comprehending nothing was impossible given his level of understanding. Never look down on that multicolored spiral, that's his post-evolution domain's domain technique, an extraordinary life seal. Long Houchen didn't know how long this seal could last, but after it entered the gorilla's body, he found out that all its aura of life was assimilated by his seal. Should no one get rid of this seal within 7 days, it would make the life alteration of this gorilla permanent. In other words, really turn it back into an infant. Only by restarting from scratch would it gain the chance of reaching this boundary anew. Withdrawing the domain, although Long Houchen felt somewhat tired, the happiness in his eyes stood with no doubt. He had gained his second domain technique, and this domain technique was truly miraculous. In some meaning, it could determine a person's age, life, or death. To be in control of life, what kind of cheat was that? The young girl Cece couldn't help but stare at the scene in front of her eyes. Although she remained vigilant toward Long Houchen, his domain's power of nature and life had unwittingly raised some feelings of cordiality in her. It should be okay. I have sealed the growth trajectory of his life. His body has been restricted to this state and would only return to its original power after growing back. And that will be a long process. Thank you for your benevolence. May the lords of nature praise you. Cece gazed at Long Houchen and said very earnestly. Long Houchen seemed to want to say something as the emotionless voice from before once again sounded out within him. Second mission opened. Assist Cece in rescuing her family, and moreover, earn her trust and have her take the initiative of offering her treasure. Failure of the mission will cause the test to fail. Although Long Houchen was already thinking that rescuing Cece was just the start of the trial, after accepting the mission, he still couldn't help but be alarmed. Eastern's king that Cece had spoken about was absolutely the most terrifying existence of this plane. For one of his house pets to be so strong, how could the person himself reach such a degree of power? Even if he didn't reach a level such as the demon god emperors, at least he would be a match for the likes of the moon demon god or star demon god. Such a degree of strength was nothing the current Long Houchen could contend with, especially when is unable to get Haoyue's assistance. Cece, what are your plans from now on? In the previous conversation they had exchanged names with each other. Cece's expression darkened, her cute face showing a helpless expression. I don't know either. That devil is just too powerful, my family. Saying so, she couldn't help but cry again. Long Houchen furrowed his brows and declared, stop crying for now. It won't solve anything. Tell me in detail, how many clans are there in Eastern? Among the lot, some are intimately related to Eastern's king, and some are enemies. Although I am thinking of assisting you, I'm still afraid our strength is not sufficient. Saying so, his thoughts only got even more serious. On one side, Long Houchen was standing as an onlooker, but on the other side, Cece had just witnessed his strength, particularly his control over life going through this mystical force. But even after seeing these, she still hadn't asked from him the favor of helping. This proved either that she didn't trust him, or that she didn't believe him to be a threat for Eastern's king. Long Houchen was more inclined to believe the latter. After all, he had already rescued her, and although they didn't have a deep contact with each other, his light god physique and the incomparable purity of his light, even if he couldn't gain Cece's complete trust, at least it wouldn't make her apprehensive. Cece silently shook her head. No. Because I have found that thing, I have already caused devastating damage to my clan. I won't give it to that devil, whom I want to destroy. Even at the cost of my life, at worst I will be joining my family's side. Seeing Cece's eyes gradually becoming filled with a resolute look, the first thing that came to Long Houchen's mind was not his own mission, but admiration for this young girl. She was not only kind-hearted, but also courageous. She may not be wise enough, but for such a beautiful girl to still have this kind of character meant she felt extremely attractive to any man. Long Houchen nodded lightly. I can comprehend that you are unwilling to implicate someone else. But that way, I'm afraid your family would hardly make it through alive. Cece replied in distress, perhaps, but that is fate. Sir Long, you have saved my life, and I am unable to return the favor. This Cece was originally about to die. If you give in, I am willing to offer my clean self to you. This could be considered a repayment for the favor of saving my life. Anyway, this body will come clean again in my next life. Long Houchen jumped in start, his ears immediately reddening. If he was told this back when he was not very aware of matters between males and females, he wouldn't give it much thought. But just before taking the test, Saya and him had just crossed the line. That was the first time he had experienced that beautiful act. Cece was moreover such a beauty, her white clothing being completely insufficient to cover up her magnificent curves. When facing a beautiful woman, anyone would show some reaction. One could for instance show admiration, have dirty thoughts, or get awkward and embarrassed. That last was exactly Long Houchen's case. Cece, don't be like that. In front of Cece's expression of distress as she looked about to take him under her embrace, Long Houchen really felt somewhat at a loss. Grabbing her shoulders in his hands in a hurry, he forced her into a certain distance from him. Cece raised her head to look at Long Houchen, her eyes hazy with tears. Sir Long, am I not to your liking, or are you afraid of getting involved with me? My body is really pure, and has never been in any man's hands. Hearing all she said, Long Houchen immediately felt his hands loosen as if electrocuted, as he forced a smile. Listen to me, Cece. I just happened to be here to save you, and had no intention to get repaid in such a manner. Moreover, right because I happened to encounter such a matter, I was thinking of helping out. I may not be capable enough to contend against a powerful opponent such as Eastern's king, but I will still give it a try. If we are lucky enough, maybe your family can be saved. Even if we are unable to succeed, you mustn't renounce living so lightly. There is always a hope for the living, but nothing can be done for the dead. Cece silently nodded. Thank you, Sir Long. I really don't know how I can thank you. As you have saved my life, you can have my body anytime you want. Long Houchen waved his hands repeatedly in embarrassment. Don't be like that, Cece. Let's first think up a way to rescue your family. Where did you say Eastern's king lives? Are you able to draw out a map? Cece nodded. Yes. Immediately, she crouched in front of Long Houchen, drawing a detailed map using branches on the ground. Her drawing was pretty good, and as she drew she also told Long Houchen about the arrangements around Eastern's king's residence. Eastern's king doesn't have his own army, but wields a formidable power of nature. At least 10 magical beasts of that previous gorilla's grade serve as his house pets. If we want to break past them into his cave, then we must avoid its guards. My family is very possibly in the deepest part of this cave. Long Houchen calmly listened to her arrangements, continuously nodding, and engraving her words in his memories. Cece's body frequently let out a thin fragrance entering Long Houchen's nose, different from the fragrance emitted from Cia's body. The sweetness from Cece's body was imbued with the aura of life, just like a flower full of enticement, fresh and clean, elegant and magnificent. However, Long Houchen showed an unflustered attitude. Neither his eyes, nose, mouth, nor his heart paid any special attention to Cece. The map and arrangements are such. Cece revealed to Long Houchen a sweet smile, apparently having already suppressed her pain compared to before. When she smiled, she truly was a peerless beauty. Long Houchen gave it some thought. I suggest scouting the area first, to search for some specific information. If there is a chance, I will be entering the cave to search for your relatives. Remain outside in a safe spot, ready to provide support. How could that be okay? How could I leave you to take care of my matters all alone? Cece shook her head firmly. I will be entering with you. Back when my father was still alive, he had formerly taken me to Eastern's King's Cave, so I'm more familiar than you with that place. And Sir Long, I disagree with your plan. By attempting to scout the area, it would be very possible to inadvertently alert the enemy. In case Eastern's king gets on guard, it will get even nearer to impossible for us to succeed. The king has a habit. He takes a nap every day at noon, and for about a duration of 1 hour. In this process, he will be in a very, very deep sleep, but will have his body protected with a divine tool. His house pets will be guarding him extremely closely at this time, but I believe that this will be our best chance. If we can avoid those house pets as we enter his cave, we will definitely be able to save my family. Listening to Cece's organized and meticulous analysis, Long Houchen had a surprised look on his face. It seems that you were prepared for this a long time ago. The smile on Cece's pretty face stiffened and she sighed softly. With sadness in her eyes, she said, ever since my home was destroyed, I've been thinking about rescuing my family all the time, racking my brains. The method I mentioned earlier should be the most feasible one. At this point, Cece suddenly kneeled in front of Long Houchen. Her actions were too sudden, and immediately gave Long Houchen a fright. Miss Cece, what are you doing? Long Houchen wanted to help her up, but was stopped by Cece's hand. She gave Long Houchen a teary-eyed look, and said, Sir Long, after we enter the cave of Eastern's king, I have a request. If we are discovered, I will take the initiative to lead him away. You must take this opportunity to rescue my family. If I can exchange my life for my family's peace, then Cece will die a happy death. Even if my soul goes to heaven, I will never forget your kindness. As she said so, she was bowing to Long Houchen. Long Houchen naturally couldn't let her really bow down. He hurried to support her. Cece, just leave the matter of luring the enemies to me. First of all, I don't know your family, and even if I do, they might not want to go with me. Second, my cultivation is stronger than yours. I'm much more likely to get Eastern's king out of here than you are. Besides, I'm a man. How can I let you take such a risky action? However, I am a little worried. How can we enter the cave of Eastern's king without being noticed by his pets? Cece thought about it and said, there is a holy medicine in our clan. A holy medicine named lilac intoxicating. After igniting it, one would be able to put the person who smelled it into a delirious state in a short period of time. As long as without any attack, it would take them at least an hour before they woke up. If we can find this holy medicine, we won't have to kill. He would then be able to safely enter the cave of Eastern's king. If I remember correctly, there might be lilac intoxicating in a nearby cave, but I'm not sure if it's mature. Long Houchen nodded. In that case, let's go look for it. Do you remember the exact location of that cave? Cece thought about it for a moment and said, I can try and thank you. As she spoke, she released a pair of ice blue spiritual wings. With a sweet smile, she spread out her wings, flying in a certain direction. She unconsciously gave a glance to the golden wings on Long Houchen's back, her beautiful eyes filled with envy. Long Houchen gave her a look. Smiling, he spread his wings and followed. Cece flew in the air first, but she didn't fly too high. She stuck close to the treetops and looked around for a while, before looking at the bright sunlight in the sky. With a wave of her hand to Long Houchen, she chose a direction to fly in. The two of them flew for around a quarter of an hour, before descending with Long Houchen, landing beside an especially tall redwood tree. Under this big tree, there was a small hill. Cece said happily, it should be here. A redwood tree is the best coordinate. If I remember correctly, lilac intoxicating is growing in the cave behind this hill. As she spoke, she flew forward at lightning speed, bringing Long Houchen to the other side of the hill. On the surface, there seemed to be no difference from the previous ones. However, Long Houchen used his senses to scan it, discovering that on the surface of the vegetation, there was a hole that was as tall as a human, extending downwards. Moreover, he discovered that there seemed to be a magic array at the entrance of this cave. The reason why he couldn't see the situation inside was because this magic array acted as a magic barrier, and even had extraordinary defensive strength. Long Houchen's soul strength had already reached the state of minute subtlety. Under such close inspection, he definitely wouldn't feel wrong. Cece stood in front of the cave and pointed her right hand at the cave. Suddenly, a white light flashed, and the bushes in front of her slowly opened up. Cece turned around and gave a sweet smile to Long Houchen. After finding out about this place last time, in order to prevent the beasts from knocking on the holy medicine, I left a little illusion here. Long Houchen nodded. I will guard the entrance for you. You can go inside to find lilac intoxicating. Yes. Cece agreed and quickly walked into the cave. Long Houchen shut his eyes, letting the powerful soul force spread out at great speed, sensing the surrounding changes. His right hand was placed on a large tree, and his body was glinting with 7 colors. Through his evolving domain, he was increasing the strength of his soul, and in addition, he was using the profound meaning of controlling the progress of his life to enhance his soul perception through the natural environment of the tree. Not long after, Cece came out of the cave with a herb in her hands. Beneath the herb was soil, and under it was a piece of cloth. The herb was exposed to what looked like a 1-foot-long plant. It was pink in color and had 3 clusters of small white flowers on top. It really did look like lilac. Seeing Long Houchen supporting the big tree with his hand, Cece hurried over and said, Sir Long, I succeeded. Look, this is lilac intoxicating. Long Houchen's reaction was somewhat sluggish, and after hearing her voice, he stopped for a moment before turning his head to look at her. Looking at the lilac intoxicating in Cece's hand, Long Houchen asked, Is this herb enough? Cece nodded and said, Lilac intoxicating's intoxicating roots can dispel its hallucinatory toxicity. At that time, we only need to make up a small portion of the population. You've just had a fierce fight with that pet. Why don't we rest for a day and then go to King Eastern's cave tomorrow? Although she said so, the anxiety in her eyes could not be hidden. Long Houchen replied, If you can help them to the end, let's set out now. According to the task given to him by the divine throne of eternity and creation, not only did he have to help Cece rescue her family, he also had to gain her trust, thus obtaining the treasure that would exterminate her entire clan. At the beginning, when he received this mission, Long Houchen was in a very difficult situation. The previous task, even if Long Houchen didn't succeed, he could at least try his best to finish it. However, the latter was contrary to his principles. But now, he seemed to have found some clues regarding the mission. Cece gave a deep bow to Long Houchen, her beautiful big eyes filled with mist. Brother Long, we have known each other for such a short time, yet you are doing your utmost to help me. I remember this, love. If we succeed in this trip, I will repay you 10-fold, 100-fold. As long as I can save my family, I am willing to give you the job of horse or cow. After saying this, she immediately turned around and flew away, as if she was afraid she wouldn't be able to control her emotions. However, she didn't rush out of the treetop, instead dodging the trees in the forest. Although Cece's cultivation was inferior to Long Houchen's, she was a mage of the 8th step, so her flying speed was very fast. Moreover, her flying skills were quite impressive, but the speed she was traversing through the forest did not affect her speed much. As for Long Houchen, he wouldn't have a problem either. Back when he was on the second floor of the Tower of Eternity, he had fully trained his flying skills. With his powerful perception, he followed a 30-meter distance behind Cece, maintaining an equal distance from her. After flying at high speed for over half an hour, Cece chose a very covert route. During this time, Long Houchen could sense several large villages through his spiritual perception. However, they were all cleverly avoided by Cece. She clearly knew the location of these villages. In the distance, a green mountain completely covered in vegetation appeared in Long Houchen's perception. The mountain wasn't too high, not even a kilometer, but after reaching this place, the life energy of nature was at least 3 times richer than when he first arrived in this world. Cece slowed down, coming to Long Houchen's side, and said in a low voice, "Big brother Long, from now on, we have to restrain our breath." King Easton must not have even started his nap yet. His senses were extremely powerful. "We must be careful." His cave was halfway up Easton, not far ahead. "As we are approaching Easton, I'm going to light the lilac intoxicating." As she said so, she handed a thin root to Long Houchen, indicating that he could put it in his mouth. Long Houchen did as she said. As the root entered his mouth, he immediately felt a cooling sensation spread throughout his entire body, giving him a comfortable feeling. Cece advanced very carefully, and Long Houchen's body emitted a faint golden light, covering both him and Cece within it. Cece gave him a surprised look, because she discovered that she seemed to have turned into a ray of sunlight. Other than the pure light of the sun, there was no other trace of light. Long Houchen revealed a smile, pointing ahead, hinting that she could set off. After flying for about a quarter of an hour, she directly retracted her spiritual wings and landed on the ground. Although she was a mage, with the nourishment of spiritual energy for her body, her movements could still be considered agile. Long Houchen took the initiative to lead her, opening up a path filled with vegetation, making it a bit difficult for her as a mage to walk. Forward 50 meters, turn left 10 meters, continue forward 20 meters, then turn right 15 meters. Slightly slower. Behind Long Houchen, Sai kept directing him forward. Long Houchen was extremely cooperative, and under her nervous gaze, he didn't make the slightest mistake. However, he was still surprised by how familiar she was with the holy mountain of Easton. Walking would not be very fast, so it took a quarter of an hour before they reached the foot of Mount Easton. Cece stopped and looked up at the sky. Long Houchen turned around and looked at her. Seeing her long eyelashes flutter gently, he could not help but admire her beauty again. "Easton King is about to take a nap. Brother Long, it's up to you from now on. I'm going to light the holy herb." As she spoke, she lifted the intoxicating clove and cautiously lit it with an igniter in her arms. Suddenly, a light blue smoke drifted up. Instead of letting the smoke diffuse, Cece quickly released a layer of water curtain to envelope the burning intoxicating clove. As smoke combined with the water curtain turned unique light pink. The intoxicating clove burnt fast. In just a few breaths, it became ashes. But the water curtain in Cece's hands turned into an attractive pink one. She flipped her wrist and murmured a few incantations. Suddenly, the pink water curtain began to coagulate rapidly. It turned into more than a dozen pink ice beads in the size of Longen. They were beautiful as pink gemstones. Cece smiled at Long Houchen and said, "Only in this way can we store the efficacy of the holy herb. When we enter the holy mountain, detonate the ice beads so that ice fog can work. Now we can go up the mountain from here. Brother Long, we need to hurry up." As Cece spread his spiritual wings again, Long Houchen also spread his wings. They flew up close to the mountain wall. During the flight, Cece threw ice beads in different directions. As she said, when the ice beads flew out, it burst, turned into a pink mist and drifted slowly toward the distance. They did not encounter any obstacles along the way. Soon, a huge natural cave emerged ahead of them. But at the entrance of the cave, Long Houchen felt 4 strong breaths. Cece flew to Long Houchen and made a slowdown gesture. An ice bead flew up and burst in the air, and then the ice fog quietly drifted toward the hole. Very soon, the 4 powerful breaths faded. Long Houchen was surprised. As a matter of fact, intoxicating clove was potent enough to produce the desired effect. The people that guarded Eastern King's cave must be the 9th rank strong ones. He wondered whether he could use the power of light to neutralize the toxicity if he didn't put the herb's root in the mouth. Then, they flew up and landed at the entrance of the cave at the same time. A trace of excitement flashed across Cece's eyes. On the ground fell 4 huge bodies. They were identical to the gorillas Long Houchen had seen before. Even when they fell asleep, the huge body seemed to have a tremendous sense of strength. However, they just fell asleep and breathed smoothly. Seemingly knowing the doubts in Long Houchen's heart, Cece smiled and said, "Don't worry, Brother Long. Although the efficacy of intoxicating clove is very strong, it has no effect on the overmatches. Otherwise, I can use it to save my family directly. Let's come in quickly, or we'll be late. Eastern King's cave was very wide. When they entered the cave, they were surrounded by the strong natural breath, which contained huge vitality. Long Houchen felt that pores of his whole body seemed to open. He took a deep breath, and then his inner spiritual power rose at an amazing speed, which was comparable to his spiritual concentration practice. How could vitality enhance my spiritual power? Long Houchen knew very well that this was impossible in the past. It must because his cultivation was successfully promoted from the 2nd to the 3rd level of the 9th rank. Cece waved her small hand to show Long Houchen the way and accelerated to fly toward the deep cave without putting away the spiritual wings. This natural cave was so gigantic that they could feel it spacious after entering it. It seemed that half of the mountain had been hollowed out. Long Houchen and Cece was just like two negligible insects flying in it. And there was no artificial trace in this miraculous cave. It should form naturally, so it was really amazing. With no time to appreciate the magic cave, soon they arrived at the depths of the mountain. Just then, a strange voice came into Long Houchen's ear. Grunt, grunt, grunt. The deafening grunt made Long Houchen's expression suddenly strange. Is this the Eastern King? Cece nodded and whispered, he has fallen asleep. That's his grunt. Let's go quickly. Long Houchen felt funny. Did it mean that the more powerful, the louder his grunts were? This place was the widest part in the whole cave. After searching for a while, Cece took Long Houchen to a huge stone, behind which had a passage straight inward. The passage was only one person high with a huge stone in front of it. If they hadn't gotten so close, it would be impossible to find it. Brother Long, this passage should lead to the back hole. My family should be imprisoned there. Speaking of this, she paused and looked at Long Houchen, restraining the words which sprang to her lips. Long Houchen said, go and rescue them. I'll wait for you here. If Eastern King notice us, I'll help you get rid of him. Cece lightly bit her red lips, gazed deeply at Long Houchen and suddenly plunged into his arms. Long Houchen was tightly hugged by her defenselessly. Brother Long, as long as I can save my family, I will be your maid and serve you all my life. Then, she turned around and rushed into the cave. Long Houchen lifted his right hand and patted her back across the air. A small colorful vortex rushed into Cece's body. She felt that her spiritual power suddenly increased. She could not help looking back at Long Houchen gratefully. Be careful, Long Houchen advised her. Cece gently nodded, then accelerated again, and disappeared in the passage. With a leap, Long Houchen jumped onto the boulder in front of the passage. At this moment, the loud grunt stopped suddenly. Who dares to enter my forbidden land? The sound was as loud as his previous grunt. His voice echoed like thunder in the huge cave, which was over 300 meters high. Long Houchen's eyes flashed, and the light from his eternal heart fluctuated violently. Evolution in the domain of light God enabled him to directly transform the external breath of life into his own spiritual power. When the breath of life came into the range of 10 meters away from his body, it turned into countless green light spots and merged into his body, which looked very unique. A terrifying momentum poured in from all directions in an instant, while the bright 7-color light gushed out of Long Houchen. How could he not display his domain in the face of the strong people like Eastern King? Before Eastern King's arrival, the light of the green domain came first. Eastern King's domain color was very special. It was green, bright, and noble. The rich and pure breath of life was not inferior to Long Houchen's achievements in light. When green light and 7-color light met, a strange scene appeared. There was no collision between the two domains, and they quietly blended together after contact. Bright 7-color light got the upper hand. After touching the green domain, it became more dazzling. In the blink of an eye, Long's domain expanded by more than 1/3. Gee, the loud voice seemed confused. Then Long Houchen found a figure in the center of the green light and got shocked. At the same time, the green domain shrank backwards, keeping a certain distance away from Long's light domain. Long Houchen would not be so surprised if Eastern King's body was enormous, or even bigger than the gorillas outside. Actually, this king of Eastern world, who frightened Cece so much, was too short. Could he be 166 centimeters high? That was at most. If he stood in front of Long Houchen, he could not reach Long Houchen's chest position. The Eastern King had short, thick brown hair that was curly and looked unkempt. Wearing a suit of armor which seemed to be made of jadeite, his body shined with dazzling brilliance. Although he was not tall, he was extremely strong. His shoulder width was at least 2/3 of his height, so his chest was broad. Only the nose and eyes were clear on his face with large whiskers. Eastern King had a brandy nose, and his eyes were as brown as his hair. He held a huge axe, which was about the size of his body, with his left hand, and a huge hammer, whose size was not much different from the axe's, with his right hand. It looked really strange that such a short and strong guy held this pair of giant green weapons. Although the two weapons and armor of Eastern King were green, Long Houchen immediately noticed that they were all holy weapons. Color might be different, but the breath of holy weapons would not be wrong. The pure breath of life turned the whole cave green. However, Eastern King's strong momentum didn't produce much pressure on Long Houchen. The domain of light god covered the area within 30 meters of Long Houchen. As soon as any green light entered this area, it would immediately become part of the domain of light god. Long Houchen had just completed his step up, and in addition to the short time he had taken in the life domain of Eastern's king, he felt as if he was in an unprecedented state of power. But the heart of eternity on his chest kept beating, as if recovering his spiritual energy. Human, why did you enter my territory? The voice of Eastern's king was still deafening, in contrast to his body. Long Houchen replied in a deep voice, Eastern's king, for your own selfish desire, you bullied the weak, and committed the crime of clan extermination. I will make you pay for it today. As Long Houchen said that, he put his hands together above his head, and the aria of the goddess of light merged with blue rain, hibiscus of light. Dazzling rainbow lights rose up, and his light god domain rippled outward like a ripple of water. Bullshit. Eastern's king cursed loudly, brandishing his huge axe and his huge hammer at the same time. Immediately, his green life domain transformed into countless plants in the air, attacking Long Houchen's light god domain. As soon as the green light entered the multicolored golden light, the result was exactly the same as before. That jade green color actually only increased the power of the multicolored golden light, and Long Houchen's light god domains might instantly increased, charging even faster. How did this happen? Eastern's king was shocked. Hurriedly withdrawing his domain, he leaped up and threw himself at Long Houchen. Domains that were completely restrained were extremely rare. Only when the two domains were in a state of mutual domination to the extreme would it appear. And Long Houchen's domain and the domain of Eastern's king weren't only limited to restraint, but also had the characteristics of a being born together. The domain of life of Eastern's king could almost be said to be the best fuel for Long Houchen's light god domain, but in the blink of an eye, the strength of Long Houchen's domain surpassed his control. Facing the attack of Eastern's king, Long Houchen didn't show the slightest fear, both hands grasping the sword of life and creation and chopping it down on his head. It was Azura Strike. Now, Azura Strike was no longer the same as before, not only mixing the power of Long Houchen's domain with it, but also his comprehension of sword intent and sword spirit. A multicolored golden light fell from the sky like a waterfall, filling the entire mountain. Long Houchen's whole body emitted an unprecedented imposing aura. As soon as the green light surrounding Eastern's king came in contact with the multicolored golden light from Long Houchen's sword radiance, it was immediately weakened, and even the divine tool in his hand was greatly affected. However, the spiritual energy of Eastern's king was far above Long Houchen's. Letting out a loud shout, he brandished the weapons in his hands, and immediately, Long Houchen's sword intent was torn to shreds by a terrifying force. At the same time, he advanced forward, the axe in his right hand clashing against Long Houchen's sword of life and creation. Shock appeared on Long Houchen's face. He never thought that a person or any kind of creature could gain such terrifying power. He was certain that even the demon god emperor wouldn't have such strength in terms of strength. The only difference was that the sword of life and creation was contacted a little bit on the border, and in the next instant, Long Houchen's whole body flew out like an artillery shell, violently smashing against a distant wall. The stone walls in the belly of this mountain were extremely hard, but after Long Houchen's body crashed against it, green-colored debris flew in all directions, forming a huge crater. With Long Houchen's cultivation at the third rank of the 9th step, in addition to suppressing his opponent's domain's strength and sword intent, facing the power of Eastern's king, this was the result of this. His heart of eternity violently throbbed, but Long Houchen still couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He felt as if his body was crushed by a huge rock, and his whole body was in pain, especially his arms, which now felt as if they weren't his own. After that instant of contact, the sword of life and creation had already completely split apart, turning back into two heavy swords. And on top of that, fine cracks appeared, as if they were going to break at any moment. Although Houchen's body was rapidly recovering, how could such a battle continue? No wonder even his pet had such powerful strength. No wonder his short stature made such a terrifying purr. His power was actually so terrifying. Proud voice of Eastern's king rang out, haha, I has the blood of the king titan. In terms of strength, even if God comes before me, he can only bow his head in submission. Just as he was feeling proud of himself, a dense multicolored golden light slowly floated out from the hole Long Houchen made. Compared to before, this seven-colored light was even more intense. And it was following a strange trajectory with a slight hum. 7 colors circulated, and the light actually began to spin rapidly. In the next instant, Long Houchen reappeared in midair. Taking a deep breath, Long Houchen stared at Eastern's king with shining eyes, since I have no way to resist against you in terms of strength. Then, I can only use my domain. In the next instant, Long Houchen seemed to have turned into a sun, letting out a multicolored golden light, instantly illuminating every corner of the mountain. Eastern's king was also not spared. Although he possessed extremely terrifying power, he was completely suppressed by Long Houchen in terms of his attributes. A multicolored golden light covered his body, and Eastern's king immediately felt his spiritual energy being absorbed by that multicolored golden light at an astonishing speed. At this moment, he obviously could not use his domain. That would only speed up the rate at which his cultivation was being devoured by the light god domain. Only by defeating Long Houchen would he be able to get rid of the threat this light god domain posed to him. With a furious roar, the hammer in Eastern's king's right hand suddenly flew out, flying in the air like a huge green meteor as it flew at Long Houchen. Long Houchen revealed an indifferent smile. In the contest of strength, even if I were 100 times better than what I am, I wouldn't be your match. However, your domain has been completely suppressed by me. No matter how strong your strength is, you won't be a domain warrior. As he spoke, the giant hammer flashed past him, but it was only a flash of light that shattered it. The giant hammer soared through the air, arcing through the air just as it was about to make contact with the walls of the cave, returning to Eastern's king's hand. Within the cave, Eastern's king could only see a rainbow-colored ray. The light god domain allowed him to see only 7 colors of the world. The cave seemed disappeared, and everything around him was just the colorful ray. Just as Long Houchen had said, without a confrontation between domains, ordinary powerhouses wouldn't have the slightest chance of fighting against a domain powerhouse of the same level. The domination of the domain alone made him powerless. Eastern's king was silent, his brown eyes shining. He kept a pair of huge weapons on either side of his body, sensing Long Houchen's location. But he soon found that it was useless. Because in Long Houchen's domain, the only thing he could sense was light. He couldn't detect even a trace of his soul aura. Long Houchen was currently hidden in the light god domain, healing his body at high speed while his brain was operating at high speed. If not for his domain of absolute restraint, even the strongest human expert in the Holy Demon Continent, Yang Haoyu the Divine Star Knight, wouldn't be a match for Eastern's king. His strength was too terrifying. Within his domain, the power of life was even purer. Fortunately, Long Houchen's light god domain had evolved, and after obtaining the ability to control the progress of life, he was able to achieve the effect of fusion of life energy. Otherwise, he would have no other choice but to escape. Under the influence of the light god domain, his spiritual energy was greatly reduced. No matter how strong his physical strength was, after losing the support of his spiritual energy, he could only be slowly ground to death by Long Houchen. Eastern's king's eyes were filled with unwillingness. This battle had been too stifling. He had never thought that there would be someone with a domain that could restrain his domain so much. One must know that his life domain had a powerful ability to control the life force of all animals and plants. Once it was covered by his domain, the life force of the enemy would be rapidly drained. No one had ever been a threat to Eastern's king. However, contrary to his expectations, he was in big trouble today. In the face of the light god domain that Long Houchen had evolved into, it was like a firewood meeting fire. And then his firewood would have to be lit. With a roar at the sky, Eastern's king's life force erupted like a geyser. The hidden life realm bloomed once again. Although he was only drinking poison to quench his thirst, this was the only way for him to discover Long Houchen's position through the collision of domains. In a flash, Eastern's king's speed reached its peak, while at the same time, the weapons in his hands flew out, covering the direction Long Houchen was in. These two divine artifacts rapidly pounced at Long Houchen, but just as they were about to come into contact, they clashed against each other, letting out an extremely terrifying explosion. A thick layer of emerald lightning spread out in all directions, covering an area of at least 300 square meters. Haha, let's see where you can run now. Being struck by my unparalleled thunder, even if your domain restrains me, you will fall into a state of paralysis and shock. At this point, Eastern's king realized that something was wrong. This was because he discovered that Long Houchen's figure had disappeared, and the light god domain was speeding up its assimilation into his domain of life. No, that's impossible. Eastern's king caught the two flying divine artifacts with a look of disbelief. Part 1 end here.